Your next problem is a non-calculator problem. As soon as I get it all on the screen, there you go, and we will pause it. Okay, now that you've paused your video, hopefully that you've had a few minutes to work on it. Here's what we're looking at. This is the graph that we have, and they define for us g of x. They tell us that g of x is the integral from 1 to x of f of t dt. Now, this, hopefully, if you ever see anything in this context, you start thinking about the fundamental theorem of calculus, which tells us that the derivative of the antiderivative is the function itself. And that may or may not come up in this problem, but there's a good chance that it will. All right, the other thing that they have, they do ask later on a few other things about this problem. So I went ahead and said, well, I do know that g prime of x would be the same thing as f of x. And I know that g double prime of x, or the second derivative of g of x, any question about concavity would do with that, is equal to the derivative. So let's go ahead and look at part A, which y'all have had an opportunity to work on. Part A asks you to simply find what g of 2 is and what g of negative 2 is. Well, g of 2 would be the integral from 1 to 2 of f of x. Now, this point right here was the point 3, 1. So we go from here to here. The slope is constant, so that would be the point 2, 1/2. So you've got a triangle of length of 1, base of 1/2. So 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. So g of 2 would be 1/4. All right, g of negative 2. Now, this situation here, we are working from right to left. So anything, actually, I apologize, this is negative because we are below the x-axis. All right, so the next one, the part below the x-axis is going to be positive because we're working from right to left. So right to left, you've got a semicircle, radius of 1, so it's going to be pi over 2. And then you have this triangle here to get to negative 2. This has a height of 3. So this would be plus, no, it actually minus because it's above the x-axis. 1/2 of the base, which is 1, and the height is 3. So we get pi over 2 minus 3/2. So that ends part A for us. Going on to part B. Part B asks for g of negative 3, g prime of negative 3, and g double prime of negative 3. Well, we know that that's f of negative 3, and this is the same thing as f prime of negative 3. So if they ask for a reason, this is reason enough, where you show that these two things are equal to each other. And actually, if you show it here, you've shown it enough times. F of negative 3, all right? So f of negative 3, you go back 3, this would be up 2. So f of negative 3 is 2. And g double prime of negative 3 is the same thing as f prime of negative 3. Well, here's negative 3. It has a slope there because, again, f prime, we're looking for the slope. The slope there is going to be 1. All right, on to part C. And I'll have to raise that up from time to time. Okay, C says that we need to find the x values of each point at which the graph of G has a horizontal tangent line. So what we want to know is where is G prime equal to 0? And where G prime is equal to 0 is where f of x is equal to 0. Now f of x is equal to 0 at -1 and at +1. Now let's talk about this. Does this mean necessarily that there's a horizontal tangent line? It actually does, because those have slopes of zeros. These are defined values. Even though this point right here is not differentiable, remember, this is the graph of f. This is not the graph of G. G has a definite value there, and it is differentiable there. If it wasn't differentiable, then we wouldn't have gotten an answer for it. All right, so the rest of this question says, now determine whether these are relative minimums, relative maximums, or neither. Relative minimums, relative maximums, or neither. So at -1, if we look at -1, the slope goes from, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to erase these parts here because I'm too busy pointing at that. But I'll go ahead and talk about this real quick. You got 1 point for getting this correct, 1 point for getting this correct. Now in part B, again, you got 1 point for getting this correct and 1 point for getting this correct. So there's 4 points, 4 of the 9 points up till now. So on to part C again. We said at 1 and -1. Well, at 1, or at -1, sorry, we go from positive slopes to negative slopes. So if we go from positive slopes to negative slopes, we end up with a relative maximum. And then we go from negative slopes. We get a slope of 0, and then we have more negative slopes. So at +1, it's neither. All right. Now on to, and the reason being, no sign change. So you've got, first off, you got a point for just finding where G prime was 0. So that's -1 and 1. So that was 1 point for that. Actually, that's 2 points to get to there. And then the explanation of why, okay, you could say because f went from positive to negative. That's the reason we had a relative maximum. And then f did not change signs. All right, part D. For -4 to 3, find all values for which the graph of G has a point of inflection. Well, G prime of x equals to f prime of x. So we need to know where f prime is either 0 or undefined. But we also need to change directions. So we change directions here at -2. Then we change directions at 0. And we change directions again at 1. So these are our 3 x values where we have points of inflection for G. And for the explanation, you can say, again, you have this written down. So because that is true, you could say, here you could say f goes from increasing to decreasing. At 0, f goes from decreasing to increasing. And at 1, f goes from increasing to decreasing. Okay, so this is the problem again. Hopefully you were successful with doing that. This was broken down into 2 points, 1 point for getting the correct x values, and then 1 point for your explanations. Tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to take on a differential equation, so you have that to look forward to. Again, I appreciate each one of you working hard on this and keep on going. And soon, if you're taking the AP test, it is still going on. They will be at-home tests. So if you're going to be taking the AP test, you'll be getting information around the 3rd of April, I think is what Dr. Ratcliffe had told me, and he will be sending out a survey on whether or not to take it. I believe each one of you is prepared for it very well. If you have a question about whether or not you should take it, don't hesitate to email me and ask for my opinion. I would probably tell you yes. But anyway, keep working hard and email me any questions that you have. Thank you.